The summer sun was fading fast on September 4, 2021, when the ordinary rhythm of the 600 block of Longfellow Street NW in Washington, D.C. shattered. At approximately 7:33 p.m., the peace of a neighborhood gathering exploded into chaos. Metropolitan Police Department dispatchers received frantic calls, gunshots, panic screams, people running for cover. 2 minutes later, a crowd scattered, the pavement stained with life-changing consequences. This wasn't a drive-by gone wrong. This was calculated. According to the federal case file, 4 men Erwin Dubose, Camarquine, William Johnson Lee, and DeMonta Thompson drove to the corner of Longfellow and 7th Streets, exited the vehicle, and opened fire into a neighborhood gathering of friends and families. The assault killed 3 people: Donetta Dyson, 31, Keenan Braxton, 24, and Johnny Joyner, 37. 3 others were wounded. D.C. witness. What looked like a random act of urban violence turned out to be neither random nor insulated from motive. Investigators later discovered the attack was allegedly retaliation. An hour earlier, a shooting had occurred in a nearby sector of the city. The borough's calm facade was cracked, and underneath, a cycle of payback and territorial hostility. Scene by scene, the night of carnage. It was dusk, but streetlights were already flickering. The gathering on Longfellow Street was a mix of young adults laughing, children drifting between adults, the hum of ambient traffic in Washington's northwest quadrant. On the corner, a black sedan rolled up, Thompson behind the wheel, Dubose, Queen, Johnson Lee in the back seat, silent, focused. The crowd didn't notice them at first. Then the door opened, and the shooters crept forward. Bullets ripped into the gathering. 1 victim went down in the gutter. Another collapsed on the sidewalk, stunned. A third bled out, clutching the concrete. The sedan peeled away. Thompson drove like the night itself was chasing him. Within minutes, pandemonium. First responders flooded the block. Flashing lights painted the scene in red and blue. An officer later described the smell of powder in the air, blood on the curb, children crying in shock. The investigators from MPD and the federal U.S. Attorney's Office descended. They found shell casings littering the corner. Witnesses quoted screams, cars speeding out, a vehicle set ablaze days later on Eid Street NE. Meet the players, motives, and the cast. Erwin Dubose, 31, alleged ringleader shooter. He knew the neighborhood fast and hard. His sentence would later top 120 years. Camarquine, 28, second shooter, clocking in similarly grave. William Johnson Lee, 22, the youngest of the shooters, fast-moving but ruthless. DeMonta Thompson, 28, the driver, tasked with ferrying the shooters. His role, the getaway. Then there were 2 more, Mussy Rezine and Toya Johnson, accused of accessory after the fact, tampering with evidence, setting fire to the vehicle that ferried the killers. Their sentences were shorter, but their guilt tied them irrevocably to the carnage. All of this built the narrative of a neighborhood turned battlefield. 1 neighborhood meeting, 1 turn of the key, and the plan executed. The investigation, pulling at threads. Detectives realized early the crime wasn't spontaneous, it was pre-planned. Surveillance footage placed the sedan in the area. Shell casings matched a weapon type recovered later. Witnesses identified Thompson's driving pattern matching the car seen fleeing. Investigators uncovered that the sedan had been burnt on the 4500 block of Eid Street NE 2 days later, an attempt to destroy evidence. Inside the block of Longfellow, MPD canvassed houses, interviewed survivors, collected shell casings and bullets. Forensic analysts traced the bullets, matching them to weapons used by dealers in the area. The motive, retaliation for the earlier shooting. The investigators said the defendants turned a block into a battlefield. D.C. witness. Meanwhile, the families of victims were racked by grief, pressuring police, demanding justice. A surviving victim's aunt called the shooters monsters who needed to be taken off the streets. D.C. witness. The sentencing build-up. The trial wasn't simple. The jury deliberated months later, in July 2025, convicting Dubose, Queen, Johnson Lee, and Thompson of first-degree murder and assault while armed. Rezine and Johnson found guilty of accessory and tampering charges. Then came October 30, 2025, the day justice was meted out. The ringleaders received more than a century behind bars. One shooter received 123 years, another 120, another 105. Thompson got 35 years. Rezine got 3 years. Johnson received a suspended sentence after tampering convictions. The sentences reflected more than punishment. They were a message. The U.S. attorney proclaimed, "This senseless violence will not be tolerated in the city." Department of Justice tensions and questions linger. Why did it escalate so quickly? Why shoot into a neighborhood gathering? The investigation pointed to an earlier conflict on Oglethorpe Street hours before the carnage. The shooters believed revenge was due, and the 600 block of Longfellow was the theater of retribution. But questions remained. Was someone else pulling the trigger? Did the group act independently? How many more lives were touched beyond the 6 charged? Investigators believe the ripple of fear spread through the community far beyond the 3 dead and 3 wounded. As the chapter closes, the detectives opened a locked file. Inside, a surprising link. A witness statement pointing to one of the shooters meeting with the city official days before the attack. A secret call, a hidden gun stash in a basement near the crime scene, and an encrypted message found on a burner phone. Longfellow, 7th. Make it hot. As they cracked the phone code, the investigators realized the narrative they thought they understood was only surface deep. The real story? It was still unfolding. November 2021. Just 2 months after the city was rocked by the Longfellow massacre, Detective Michael Raines stood before a locked basement door. The hinges screamed as it groaned open, releasing a wave of oil, sweat, and burnt rubber. He flicked on his flashlight, cutting through the darkness. What the beam revealed wasn't just a stash, it was an armory. Rusting shelves held boxes of ammunition, hollow point bullets, and a Glock 19 with its serial number completely filed off. But it was a neat row of 12 burner phones that made Raines freeze. Each was labeled with initials, matching the 6 men already convicted for the shooting. Taped to the final phone was a torn envelope. Scrawled across it in black ink was one word: payback. The handwriting didn't match any of the 6 shooters. This case, which they thought was closing, had just been blown wide open. The shooters weren't lone wolves. They were foot soldiers in a much larger war. Investigators immediately went to work on the recovered phones. Though damaged, the data was a goldmine. It revealed pings crisscrossing D.C. neighborhoods from Petworth to Brentwood. The calls were timed perfectly minutes before and after the shooting. This was coordination, not coincidence. On one decrypted phone, a text thread led them to a contact listed only as T6. The group, they learned, called themselves the T6 Movement. According to a cooperating witness, T stood for terror and 6 for the number of shooters in their cell. This crew was built on retaliation and silence. Detective Raines met with Assistant U.S. Attorney Erica Banks, the lead prosecutor. Her voice cracked as she described what her team had uncovered. A chat thread detailing the entire plan to make Longfellow bleed. They had timestamps, car descriptions, even weapon lists. The shock wasn't that the T6 crew planned the attack, but who they were talking to. The digital trail led directly to a known street intermediary, Ronnie "Ghost" Lawson, a D.C. native with a reputation for financing gun drops across the city. Lawson wasn't one of the 6 men already sentenced, but his fingerprints were metaphorically all over the operation. As one analyst grimly put it, the T6 crew may have pulled the trigger, but someone else loaded the gun. Following the initial arrests, a tense, unnatural calm fell over Northwest D.C. Families boarded up windows. People whispered about retaliation, about Ghost still being out there, orchestrating silence with threats. Detectives began re-interviewing survivors. One woman, Carla Dyson, remembered something odd. A strange car, windows tinted, idling on the corner for days before the shooting. She recalled a man inside, wearing a thick gold chain and a black hoodie, constantly on his phone. When detectives showed her a photo array, she hesitated, Then her finger trembled as it pointed directly at Ronnie Lawson's mugshot. By mid-2022, while the trial for the 6 shooters was underway, the quiet investigation into Lawson was heating up. Federal agents followed a trail from the burnt-out getaway car to a small garage in Prince George's County. Inside, they found the same type of accelerant used at the scene. And hidden beneath the floorboards, they discovered a laptop and several flash drives. Forensic specialists extracted fragmented chat logs detailing weapon lists, PayPal transactions, and messages that specifically referenced 7th and Longfellow. Then came the bombshell. They found receipts for cash transfers from one of Lawson's shell companies to the families of at least 2 of the shooters. The payments were made just 2 days before the massacre. They had their financier, but they still needed to prove he ordered the attack. The break came from inside the D.C. jail. William Johnson Lee, the youngest of the 6 shooters, was cracking under the pressure of solitary confinement. When prosecutors offered him a deal to reduce his staggering 105-year sentence, he started talking. He confessed that Lawson had promised them respect and revenge. Lawson supplied everything: the car, the weapons, and the exact location of their targets. It was supposed to be quick, Johnson Lee admitted, but everyone just started shooting. Lawson's motive: pure revenge. His younger cousin had been grazed by a bullet in a scuffle with a rival crew earlier that day. Lawson wanted to send a message that nobody would ever forget. This was the final piece of the puzzle. A sealed indictment for Ronnie "Ghost" Lawson was prepared. But just as they were about to move, things went sideways. Days before the indictment was to become public, an unmarked police SUV transporting evidence from the Longfellow case was ambushed on the Anacostia Freeway. A white pickup truck rammed the SUV, and masked men opened fire. In the chaos, a crucial evidence bag vanished, the one containing the burner phone linking directly to Lawson. One detective was hospitalized. The attackers were gone. The message was clear. Lawson knew they were coming. Someone on the inside had tipped him off. By July 2025, the federal jury returned its verdict. The T-66 were convicted, their combined sentences totaling nearly 380 years. The judge called their crime an act of war on civilians. As the 6 men were led away, Detective Rains and Asa Banks exchanged grim looks. They had won the battle, but the true orchestrator, Ghost Lawson, was still missing, and justice felt incomplete. Then, on the evening of November 1 Street, 2025, a maintenance worker made a chilling discovery in a warehouse on New York Avenue. Inside a burnt-out sedan, the same model used in the shooting, was a body, burned beyond recognition. A melted gold chain was fused to the skeleton. DNA tests confirmed it. Ronnie "Ghost" Lawson was dead. But this story had one final, terrifying twist. Lodged between the charred seats was a small, miraculously intact steel box. Inside, a single SIM card. Investigators worked quickly to decrypt it. They found only one outgoing message, sent hours before the fire. "They think this ends with me." But there's still one more. The message was traced to a new contact. The room went silent as the name appeared on the screen. Rains. The last person Ghost Lawson ever contacted was the detective who had been hunting him from the very beginning. The fluorescent hum of the evidence room buzzed low as Detective Michael Rains sat before the decrypted SIM log. His pulse thudded in his throat. On screen, a string of messages blinked open, each one time-stamped an hour before the warehouse fire that killed Ronnie "Ghost" Lawson. "Ghost, everything in motion? Unknown contact. The basement's clean. They'll find what we want them to. Ghost, good. When it burns, they'll chase shadows." Then, the final line, the one that made Rain's stomach drop. "Ghost, see you soon, Mike. You still owe me." For a long moment he stared, unblinking, at the name. Mike. No one called him that except people from a lifetime he thought he'd buried. Shadows from the past. Back in 2010, Rains had been a narcotics officer embedded in Brentwood, deep undercover. His handler back then was an informant named Ronnie Lawson. Ghost. Together, they dismantled a major heroin pipeline. But when that operation collapsed and the informant network was compromised, Lawson disappeared into the city's underworld. Rains had always told himself Lawson was dead, He'd even signed the report that declared the man a presumed fatality. Now, 15 years later, his old informant was back at the center of D.C.'s worst mass shooting in decades. The SIM data revealed more. Dozens of outgoing payments from Ghost's accounts to consultants working within law enforcement. And in the department's database, R9 was Rain's old undercover ID. Someone had used his identity to fund the T6 operation. Breaking point when Assistant U.S. Attorney Erica Banks arrived at the precinct. She found Rain sitting alone, staring at the monitor. "Mike, what did he mean, you owe him?" she asked quietly. Rains didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a faded file marked Operation Nightlight, 2010. Inside were mugshots, old warrants, and a grainy surveillance photo. Lawson, young, grinning, with Rains beside him. "He was my informant," Rains said finally. "He saved my life once. I guess he thought that meant he owned me." Banks frowned. "You think someone's framing you?" Rains nodded. "Or using my name to keep the heat off themselves. Either way, Ghost wanted me to find this." The conspiracy unfolds. Digging deeper, the forensics team traced the R9 payments through a web of shell companies. One of them linked directly to a city redevelopment contract, money routed through a fake construction firm that, on paper, repaired storm drains. The company's registered agent? A retired D.C. police lieutenant. Another payment landed inside the pension fund of a current department commander. The implication was chilling. Ghost's reach had burrowed deep into the police hierarchy. The T6 massacre might have been more than vengeance. It could have been a violent distraction to bury years of corruption and kickback schemes. And the man who'd signed off on those old redevelopment files? Detective Michael Rains. The setup. 2 days later, Rains was called into internal affairs. The evidence logs, the SIM card, even his fingerprints on the recovered box, everything pointed at him as an inside accomplice. "I'm being framed," he told them. "Ghost wanted me to take the fall after he was gone," but the lieutenant across the table only shook his head. "You were in every place that matters, Detective. Longfellow, the basement, the phone trace. Maybe you just forgot which side you were on." Within hours, Rains was suspended. The city that once trusted him now whispered his name like a curse. Descent into the underbelly. He couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe without seeing the flash of gunfire on Longfellow Street. Determined to clear his name, Rains went rogue. Using an old contact in cyber forensics, he tracked the IP addresses behind the SIM transmissions. The signal jumped across multiple towers until it landed in one place he knew all too well: the evidence locker of the Metropolitan Police Headquarters. The corruption wasn't just around him, it was inside the system. Late one night, he broke in through the sub-basement service door. Rain slicked the pavement as he descended into the vault. Rows of confiscated weapons glinted under dim light. And there, tucked behind the shelves, was a newly logged piece of evidence. Another phone. Identical make. Same encryption software. When he powered it up, a video auto-played. The confession: Ghost Lawson appeared on screen, sweat glistening under flickering light. His voice was ragged, almost pleading. "If you're watching this, Mike, they've already made me the scapegoat. I didn't start T6. They did. The badge boys. The ones in suits. I just gave them cover." He leaned forward. "They'll burn me. Then they'll burn you. You know too much." The feed ended abruptly as the door behind Rains creaked open. "Put it down, Detective." A silhouette stood there: Lieutenant Harmon, the same officer who'd suspended him. Gun drawn, voice calm. "You should have stopped digging, Mike," Harmon said. "The city's safer when ghosts stay buried." A shot rang out. The reckoning. When the dust cleared, Harmon lay wounded, clutching his side. Rains called it in himself, then dropped his service weapon and waited for backup. In the weeks that followed, federal investigators swept through the department. Files uncovered a decade of embezzlement, fake overtime reports, and gun-running operations masked as evidence transfers. Harmon and 2 other high-ranking officers were indicted. Ghost Lawson's message had been right. He hadn't started the fire. He'd simply been another pawn in a system that fed on its own rot. The courts reaffirmed the 380-year sentence for the original 6, but the headlines changed focus. Police corruption deepens. D.C. Street Massacre Mystery. Epilogue. Months later, Rains stood on Longfellow Street. The bullet holes in the brick had been patched, but the ghosts remained. Children played quietly in the distance, their laughter thin in the evening air. Banks joined him, hands in her coat pockets. "They offered you reinstatement," she said. He shook his head. "You can't police ghosts, Erica. You can only make peace with them." She nodded slowly. "What will you do now?" He looked down the block where it all began. "Tell the truth, even if no one wants to hear it." As he walked away, a phone buzzed in his pocket, an unregistered number. One message flashed across the screen: "T7 is coming." The text disappeared before he could screenshot it. Rains looked back once more at the quiet street, the city lights blinking in the distance, and whispered, "It never ends." If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens when T7 rises.